Here we are again, listeners, another episode of Compliance in Motion. And today we're very excited to have a new guest with us by the name of Ron Firnbach. He is with Complete Pest Solutions. And the fun thing about this one is I talk to guests all over the country all the time. And today I was looking at my guest list and I go, oh, this guy lives right here in the same town I do. We could have probably met somewhere and had lunch together today, Rob, and done the podcast live. That would have been a nice little twist for a change.
Yeah, right.
But Rob, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you carving some time out of your day. Our listeners are very much interested in tips, in insightful stories, anything you can share with us that kind of helps us to feel better about staying safe and injury free on the job. So let's get to it. I'll just start asking you some questions and we'll go from there. But the first question is tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this particular career and what you're kind of, you work with people all over the country who are interested in getting into the pest control business. Talk to us a little bit about that process and what goes on behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to, share our story of Complete Pest and where we're at and where we had planned on going. Um, so I, as you mentioned, born and raised Youngstown, Ohio. You mentioned we probably ran in at a chamber event. Chances are we most likely did because I am an ambassador with the chamber. We, play a very heavy role in networking in our community. So that very well may have been the case. Um, but I got into this business. I actually have a background in education. I graduated from college with an education degree. I taught phys ed, health ed for 4 years, had a family, decided, you know, a rookie teacher doesn't really make a whole lot of money. So to support a family, I had to branch out and I went into sales. Um, the owner of our company, Anthony Farrell, it's funny, we haven't met each other until he called me in for an interview while I wasn't really even looking for a job. And we had a bunch of people in common, just as you and I probably do.
Yeah.
But he wanted to develop the sales side of his company and he was going into franchising at the same time. So he wanted somebody to kind of head up the sales division in our corporate location here in Youngstown, but then present our business model to entrepreneurs all around the country that want to be a business owner through franchising and why our industry is a great industry to do it because if you can read, if you could drive a car, you can run a pest control business.
There you go.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of safety compliance, uh, certifications and different laws that we have to abide by. So, I'm sure you're going to have plenty of questions that has to deal with that.
Well, absolutely. And that's probably a really good go-to to start. So if I'm a listener out there today and I'm thinking about getting into a career where I know that I'm going to be dealing and working with chemicals that maybe I haven't worked with before, or maybe I have and I'm not, and it was a one-off for me. It wasn't like a daily thing that I was going to do. But then I start thinking about like, all right, well, this could be a business. I like being outside. I can drive. I'm people oriented. I'm self-driven and things like that. But it seems like it would be a little complicated to get started. Do you need specific licensing or certifications to
Yes.
become a pest control? Tell us about like what is the licensing or certification I would need?
So every state has different requirements to become licensed to operate, not just operate, but lay down any kind of chemical product. So Ohio is very simple. You send away for study materials through the Department of Natural, or I think it's the Department of Wildlife, I believe. Or no, wait, it's ODNR. You go to ODNR website, you request study materials to take your pest control exams, you study, you schedule a test, you take it, and Ohio licenses you. Other states are more difficult. For example, we have a franchisee in northern Atlanta area. The state of Georgia requires you to work under an established license for 3 years before
Mhm.
you can actually test and get your own license. Same
Interesting.
with the
Yeah.
state of Florida. Um, Massachusetts, we have a franchise up in, in central Massachusetts. He did not have to, um, excuse me, he did not have to service under somebody else's license, but everyone he hires who lays down product has to be individually licensed. In
Mm.
Ohio, all of our technicians could use the license of the owner of the company.
Yeah.
So he actually, when it comes to hiring, our guy in Massachusetts has to make sure he's hiring someone who is licensed, or if they're not licensed, he has to pay to get them licensed. So
Mhm.
it's a little bit more challenging. Um,
Yeah. We see
but
this all the
yeah, so
time with our customer, but we see this all the time with our customer base across the country. A lot of things originating in California from Cal OSHA. And Cal OSHA is very forward thinking and very much ahead of the curve. And a
oh
lot of
yeah,
times, what will happen is there'll be a new regulation there that finds its way all the way to the East Coast.
it
But even
does.
still, when you're working just like you're talking about right now, each state has some different type of regulation. And if you're putting chemicals down, whether it be on a lawn for whatever, or pest control or something like that, you need to get connected with the appropriate organization for certifications. And if you're even smarter, you're turning towards a franchisee organization that already has this already mapped out so that you know exactly what you need to do for the road ahead. And I would imagine that's what you guys really help someone like myself. If I was going to do it, I don't want to do it. I don't want to waste a lot of time doing it and doing it wrong. I want to know what's the cookbook, right? So tell
100%.
us about your guidance that you give people.
So, during their training process, that is when we pretty much get them, we get them into a Pest CEU course that trains each of our franchisees to their state specific tests on top of the actual physical training that they're going out and doing on their own. We do training for PPE, personal protective equipment. When it comes to our chemicals, there's a saying, label is law. So they really do make it easy for you to follow the 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 guidelines because it's spelled out the label of that product you are using. Um, when it comes to PPE, every one of our technicians and our franchisees are trained in the proper use, from gloves, eye protection, certain respirators, safety masks. During COVID, those I forget what they're called, those I-90 or I-90
Oh,
masks.
yeah, right.
We
Yeah, oh,
have
yeah.
we have stockpiles of those.
Yeah,
Um, they're also trained to recognize different hazards in different environments. Um, say if it's wet or raining, obviously they're not going to be doing any roof or ladder work. Um, if there are any electrical hazards, they're trained to make sure they point those out so they avoid them and contact the proper channels to get those issues addressed.
mhm.
Um, things like spills, emergency response protocols for spills, um, having the proper tools to clean them up, the proper products to clean them up. Luckily, we haven't had anything drastic happen for
That's
us,
good.
so we
Yeah.
haven't really had to.
Well, that means your
uh,
training program is working great, and you
It
you've got
is,
responsible, accountable franchisee ors, I guess you would say,
yes.
out there in the field. So when you say education, are you talking about, like, they're going through a series of online or offline educational for each one of like these different silos that you just mentioned, and then
So
you also
yes,
mentioned a physical part. Tell me the difference. Like, there's an online component and an actual physical piece. Go ahead.
yes. So because every state is different when it comes to their licensing requirements and their state tests, um, part of their training is remote, as in house online, and the bigger part is obviously in the field. So
Hmm.
when our franchisees come in to train, They go out into the field for 14 straight days and they're learning any and all programs, procedures, services we offer.
Mhm.
With us, we're a company that offers literally any aspect of pest control. So each state or each state and each license has multiple categories on it.
Mm.
So they're not only getting field training, but they're doing classroom training as well. So what's cool about Pest CEU, the courses that they're trained under are state specific.
Oh.
So they use the verbiage, they use the right material to literally teach to the test.
Mhm.
So if I'm in Ohio, I'm taking the
Yeah.
courses aimed towards the Ohio test. If I'm in Georgia, I can't take the test yet, but I'm getting fixed up with somebody who has a license and we're negotiating a pathway for me to use that license.
Mhm.
If I'm in Massachusetts, I'm studying to that state specific test under each category and all the material that comes with it.
So are these like is this like a 2-hour test or a one
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
like a week-long thing that I have to do?
No. So, like for the state of Ohio, you drive down to Ohio State University
Mm.
and you take the test right there at the college.
Yep.
Um, Usually that's the case. I do believe some places offer it online. They tend to not like doing it online because they feel like people could cheat real easily. Um, I'm not sure. I know Columbus is one for Ohio. I'm not sure where the other colleges host them at different times, but they're like either 2 or 4 hour tests on
Mhm.
usually on a Saturday, uh, 8 a.m. to noon if you're taking all the categories at once. And we always give a time frame for our franchisees to get licensed. We would rather them go and take their tests in 3 or 4 different parts than instead of hitting every category all at once because you're just setting them up to fail. Unless
Yeah.
they're very good test takers and they're
That wouldn't be
confident in
me.
their
Yeah.
ability to and if they're confident in their ability to pass all categories in one shot, good for you, great. But we don't force them to do that. We want them to pass. We want them to succeed. So if they have to take 7 categories in 4 or 5 different parts, we're fine with that. Just pass it and implement it.
And now how far in their organization does this go down? So this is the primary person that's gonna be running the business, goes through all these certifications. What about
Yes.
individuals that would work for them?
So um that is also a state specific law. Ohio, none of the service technicians have to be licensed. As
Hmm.
long as they're working under the owner's license, they don't have to be. We encourage them to. They actually
Sure.
get a raise in pay. We actually pay for them to go and get licensed if they wish to. Um, Massachusetts, that's a great one. No matter if you're the owner or you're the brand new technician, the bottom guy on the rung, you have to be licensed to put product down. It's just the way it is. Um,
Mhm.
you are very correct when it comes to California trickling over. I know Massachusetts readily adopts their new ideas. Rodenticides are like this close to being banned, so we have to find an alternative for our franchisee to use
Mm.
because we have a list of products and supplies that are um, that are preferred vendor relationships that are we know what the effects of those chemicals and products will be on the environment and on that
Mhm.
breed of insect. So our franchisees have to use the products that we use.
Mm.
And if he's not allowed to use a certain product that we are, then we have to adapt and adjust because that's what's coming down the pike.
Right.
Uh, the government agencies are looking to crack down on certain insecticides and different chemicals where they don't want it to be harmful for not the applicator, but for their customers' kids, their pets. Luckily, again, we haven't ran into any issues with any harmful stories. So thank God we don't have to cover anything like that.
Yeah, I
But
think, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier was, just about like the safety data sheets, the labels on the containers. So many of us are, of course, if you're doing this for a living, you should be well versed in how to handle these things. But the reality
Mhm.
of it is, if you're a new person on a job and you're working around these types of chemicals, you really need to stop and observe, read the label, and make sure you're prepared for if anything goes wrong, because it may not be something that is, you know, gonna show up 2 weeks from today on a skin rash or something like it could be very immediate with your breathing and things like that.
100%.
Tell us a few cautionary stories about this kind of a thing and being aware of the SDS sheet and that label.
So it's funny that you brought that up. Usually when you do a government bid, so say like um, there's a housing authority that's going up for bid, they want you to turn in those MSDS sheets that have all the label, all the laws
Mhm,
drawn up. Our franchisees, if you're new, you wouldn't know to just up, supply that information to a future customer or even a customer. We have customers um, that are in healthcare
mhm,
where they request that stuff. Usually, it's requested or it's brought to the owner's attention. I get reached out to on an ongoing basis from franchisees when things like this come up. That's why having a support system that's been around, like Anthony, the owner of our company, the dude's 45 years old with 30 years experience in the industry. So having him, you
yeah,
know, to learn from and have that guidance, it's an unparalleled advantage. Um, Luckily, we haven't really ran into any emergency type situations with us or our new people, but we pretty much cover all that stuff during training. And
mhm,
then we have quarterly and yearly trainings in person that we do on top of I host a monthly Zoom call with every single one of our franchisees where we're all in a group. We talk about current events in the industry, things that are happening good, things that might have not been so great. How do we adapt and overcome?
mhm,
If different insects are giving us a problem, what chemical combination would go best to eradicate that issue, to
mhm,
minimize your rehab calls? Um, so I would say the best way to handle all that is being present on a continuous basis. If
mhm.
you're continuing to drive that narrative, they follow.
And so when you're getting into like servicing your customer, is there a when dealing with these kinds of chemicals, is there a difference between working at a residential in a offering services as a residential pest control versus commercial? And I hadn't thought about it until you just said it. Like if you're doing chemicals near a nursing home, maybe you're not allowed to use certain chemicals because it's too close to people with illnesses or something like that? Or are there regulations that you need to follow?
There are regulations that you need to follow. We have not faced an incident. Well, we haven't had any um, incidents happen where we were said we can't use a certain chemical. Usually, the same products are used on residents as they are in uh, commercial spaces. The
Mhm,
main difference being the amount that is laid. Usually, homeowners they do quarterly treatments, so every 3 months. You'll lay down a little bit more product on their home because you're not going back out there for another 3 months, and you want that wall of protection.
mhm,
Businesses and different like restaurants, property management groups, food and beverage distribution places, you're on a monthly basis. Usually they're more worried about rodent than anything, but we do lay down pest control product for insects because you want to make sure they're roach free and
right, right.
fly free, things like that. The difference is how often you hit it and how much product you lay down. The actual products itself, they're pretty much the same for our monthlies and quarterlies. But
Gotcha.
there are different products that handle bed bugs. There's different products that handle carpenter ants and carpenter bees, a different
Hmm.
product handled for termites. That's where the difference in chemicals come to play when it comes to what they're treating. But if it's just basic general pest, same product for commercial and residential is just fine.
Okay, gotcha. And then what if like how so somebody's out and they're performing a pest control task, and there's some type of issue. I would imagine that you also do training for people if there's a hazardous spill,
Oh yeah.
proper cleanup, and things like that. Any insights to share in that particular area?
So when they go through their training process, that's one of the simulated things that we do. We simulate a spill. We make sure they know where to locate the cleanup supplies. If they're on a busy road, what their steps to not only maintaining their safety but the safety of the people around them. Putting out the safety cones, putting your flashers on, locate the correct products to clean up that spill, and then who to notify.
And go through like literally all of those steps because this is important stuff to me. I would imagine
Oh,
that
we go
the
through all those steps. Yeah, they don't
oh
they don't
yeah.
leave training without going through that.
Yeah, and so many of these folks are probably they don't have like a full-time safety manager. They're it.
They're doing it themselves,
They're the business owner, they're the bookkeeper, they're the safety person, they're all of these things.
at least to
So
start. Yeah.
at least to start, right. So they've got to have very good, well-rounded knowledge
Hmm.
to be in the moment to take care of particular situation. So then I would imagine there's some level of record keeping and or regulatory preparedness. So, like, if you do have somebody that comes to you and says, hey, what chemicals are you using here? Or, maybe like somebody, like a year later after you've been treating their business or something else like that, they have some kind of claim filed and they want to know who was there and what they did. Do you
Uh-huh.
also guide your franchisee owners on, like, hey, these are for regulatory compliance and preparedness, you need to keep records. What would those be
Yeah,
like?
so usually they have an IPM, an integrated pest management strategy. That those would all be listed within that IPM. Having the we have a CRM that issues that stuff electronically as well, but every one of our franchisees, even all of our technicians, have a physical book that has an IPM mapped out in it, all MSDS sheets mapped out in it, cleaning protocols, safety protocols, all that stuff. And we do a monthly check. Like our technician manager, he will go out to all of our technicians' vehicles and make sure that they have their binder, they have their products, they have their safety gear,
Hmm.
they have high vis vests for in case something were to happen, traffic cones in case something were to happen. All that stuff is checked on a monthly basis to make sure that in case something were to happen, they're prepared to deal with it. Um, but yes, all same with it trickles down from corporate to all of our franchisees. They have that same binder, plan, program set into place where if it happens, it's like second nature. They fix it. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yep. That's the integrated pest management system.
There's an
So that
instant, yeah, IPM, integrated pest management plan, that could be changed depending on what service you're providing and to who you're providing it for. But there's one ultimate one that stays status quo, and that has
mhm.
everything that you need in it.
So I would imagine that, there's also when we're talking about PPE, it's got to be pretty important when you're dealing with these kinds of chemicals.
Yep.
And you're just thinking about myself, like how often times a year am I actually spraying something around my house or my office? Not that often, right? But you
Yeah.
still should take some cautionary, make sure you're not breathing in these things.
Oh
What
yeah.
are the standards for anyone, you know, that owns one of your franchises? Is like, hey, these are the standard PPE things that you need to be aware of when dealing with chemicals.
Steel toed boots, long pants. You're not allowed to have short. You're not allowed to wear shorts.
Yep.
You have to have your sleeve. Well, some states you have to have your forearms covered, like down to your wrists. Some states you don't. Ohio, you can wear a short sleeve shirt. I believe Georgia, you have to have a long sleeve shirt. Um, Steel toe boots, pants, sleeves, uh, eye protection is a must. Having a respirator is a must because if you're not in a well ventilated area, you don't want to be breathing that stuff in with the animals or
Right.
with the insects. But I should mention that in this day and age, the chemicals that we use are very, very heavily diluted. Um, Usually, and again, this would be on the label per product. Usually, it's about 1 gallon of water per every ounce of chemical.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
very harmful for pests. For humans, it's nothing like it was in like the 60s and
Th
70s, where
they
it
were
would take the
little.
paint off the walls.
Yeah, right.
It is much heavier regulated now than it was.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that I just want to get out there first and foremost because this industry comes with kind of a bad connotation. Oh, I don't want you spraying that around my kids or my pets. I don't want to be breathing that in. Listen, after we spray it and it dries, it's perfectly safe. You're not at any risk. We don't have people's pets dying, their kids dying, nothing like that. So I wanted
Mhm,
to take that scare factor out of it. But in case there were something to happen, your pest control professional should be prepared. If
mhm.
they're not doing you a disservice, they're doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah. That's very good to hear because I do think that we, the layman in me who doesn't understand the use, and of course there's some chemicals that don't fit into the category that you just mentioned, but those probably have very specific applications and uses and things like that. But when we're talking about the, kind of like the majority of things, you see your neighbor or you see a restaurant or you see some other place, they've just used chemicals and you immediately think, kind of the worst.
Yeah, you
But
think you're gonna
but
get poisoned.
yeah, a lot of this really has been tempered down. Not to say that you shouldn't still be careful. Now, this
Oh,
also,
100%.
we talked a little bit about like what chemicals used to be back in the 60s and 70s and what they're like today. How often does someone who owns a franchise or in this business and working with chemicals should we be concerned about, like, constantly updating regulatory changes? Or is this something that's usually it's unless there's a chemical that all of a sudden spikes interest everywhere because somebody just discovered it's really bad. But the majority of the core products that get used, is it fairly, like it's fairly consistent. You don't have to worry about it changing too much. Is that true?
Yeah, they are very consistent. Um, it, even different brands usually have the same chemical formula to still do the job.
Mhm.
Um, Again, most of them, the dilution rate ratio is huge. Um, it is important to stay up to date on different regulations, especially through government agencies and the such. But the impact is not very huge. The year to year, it's not that big. But who's to say that in 6 months a lawsuit comes out where a very
Yeah.
very
Some
popular
Mm.
product started
Mhm.
causing mesothelioma,
Yeah,
and
right,
there's a huge lawsuit.
right.
We can't tell the future, but again, as long as you're following just basic safety training, your basic safety tips, you should be fine.
Yeah. It seems like, that is definitely the case with any of the safety topics that we come across. Follow the safety tips.
Well, yeah,
They're
just
there
follow
for
your
a
regulations. Label is law. They say
yeah,
that for a reason.
they
If
are
you can
there for a
read, you
reason,
can.
right. Yeah,
Yep.
they are there for a reason, and if you're somebody who's going to be around chemicals, uh, and if you're working for an employer that's just like, "Get out there and do it," take the accountability and responsibility yourself to read that label and make sure that you understand,
100%.
the proper use and that because, you don't of course, you're concerned about yourself, but you also wanna be concerned for others that are around you to make sure the environment is prepared accordingly for use of a particular chemical. So,
100%. We don't want any of our employees getting sick or anything like that.
right.
So we're all about, listen, make sure you handle this stuff with care.
Yep. So, from my take after talking to you today, being in the pest control business to me sounded like something that was, wow, I gotta know what I'm doing before I even thought about being a franchise owner of that. But there's a clear path where you can learn and be supported by your organization on your journey to not only establish your business and run it as a business, which is a side that we didn't even talk about today. Obviously,
It's
compliance in motion is all about safety for our listeners.
it's yeah,
And
I
I'm sure
expected
that
that.
Rob and his group all can help you out with all of the checks and balances on how to run a profitable business and make it successful. But we really appreciate Rob for taking his time today and focusing more on the safety and compliance side. As we're wrapping up today, what one or two things might you leave with our listeners in general about starting a career in pest control? And then secondly, on any words of wisdom about working with chemicals and pest control and things like that, just as like kind of like two provoking thoughts to get people going down the right path.
Well, if you're thinking about doing something in pest control, definitely look into franchising. At the end of the day, it will cost you less in trial and error than it will just to join a franchise and have a ready-made plan laid out for you to run a successful business. If you implement what you're taught during training, what corporate does at the corporate level when it comes to advertising, marketing, sales, if you implement the same thing, there's no reason you shouldn't have the same success. So that's what I have to say about the whole running a successful business in pest control. On the safety and compliance side, label is law. Have the right PPE. Make sure you're fully stocked every day, and be vigilant. Accidents are called accidents for a reason, and it's usually happening when you got too many things going on at once. Be vigilant. Take your time, and avoid accidents by doing
There,
so.
and there you have it. That is a common theme for this podcast, whichever
I'm
guest we
sure
have
it
on.
is.
Take your time, be vigilant, stop, pause, think, and then do the action. And you will go home in the same condition that you started your work today. So that's it. Well, thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in today for another episode of Compliance in Motion. I'm Tony DeSantis, CEO of Ving. If you ever are looking for safety training programs that you would like to focus in on with your mobile workforce out in the field, we've got you covered with microburst training. And if you're ever looking to go into the pest control business, well, you know, there is one stop that you want to make first, and that's give Rob a call, and he'll be glad to point you in the right direction. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. Greatly appreciate your efforts on spreading the word on safety and how to stay compliant in your organization. Rob, thanks again so much, and we'll hope to see you around town.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Yep. Hope to see you too.